And I am recording it. When the recording is done, when we're done with this, assuming it goes okay, we'll post it on our YouTube channel, I guess, and I'll send out an email and let you. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Arthur Buto. Let me turn on my camera. Sorry. I'm with the statewide GIS program in the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping things. If you want to ask a question, raise your hand, your Zoom hand, or you can type your question in the chat. Christine Chaplin is going to be helping me out today. She'll be monitoring the chat. Keep yourselves muted unless you're called on to ask your question. We'll try to kind of gracefully squeeze the questions in during the talk without too much interruption, hopefully. So that was a heads up to you, Asia. Maybe interrupting you. Don't make sure you take a breath so we can sneak a question in there.
No, that's fine. That sounds really good.
With that, I'd like to introduce our speaker today. We're pleased to have with us Asia Wasser from the County of Hawaiʻi. Asia is a GIS analyst with the county, and she helps support incident response efforts at the Hawaii County Civil Defense Agency, most recently with response to the Mauna Loa eruption event earlier this month. Today, she's going to talk a little bit about that, about some of the GIS tools she utilized, and about the collaboration between Hawaiian Volcano Observatory and the Civil Defense Agency. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Asia.
Okay, thank you, Arthur, and thank you for the invitation. It's been a pretty busy month here at Hawaii County. We had just wrapped up the Mauna Loa eruption event last Friday, actually, and then quickly moved into the severe weather event Sunday evening, which actually was, all counties, I think, are kind of feeling that. So anyways, it has been a little bit busy, but that being said, I'm still happy to have this opportunity to talk about GIS today. Fair warning, though, this is a very informal talk. I don't have a PowerPoint. I will do a screen share at some point a little later on, but I'm mostly just going to kind of talk about how Hawaii County uses GIS in emergency operations. And Arthur had kind of asked me to talk about the ArcGIS Hub platform. So that's what I'll mainly focus on. But I will also talk a little bit about some of the other GIS tools and apps that were used during the Mauna Loa eruption event. Unfortunately, I was stuck working in the EOC for long hours during that event, so I didn't really get out much. So I don't have any cool videos or cool photos to show you. So anyways, hopefully that's not too disappointing. I do want to kind of just start off by saying that Hawaii County Civil Defense Agency, which I'm just going to refer to them as Civil Defense from here out, they do use a wide variety of GIS tools and apps in normal operations. A lot of GIS data is used for visualization and analysis in web maps, dashboards, and other experience builder projects. And these are both internally and public facing. We've also used Survey 123 quite a bit for public facing surveys. It was used a lot actually during COVID, and actually we have one up right now on our website for the public to report damages from this severe weather events. It's also used by field crews to go out and do damage assessments. So yeah, we kind of have innovated Survey 123 quite a bit with operations. And then our GIS Hub, if you don't know about it, we use it as like a website creator pretty much. So it hosts a bunch of civil defense's websites, like the main civil defense page, as well as the volcano hazards, hurricanes, and COVID page. So just kind of wanted to briefly mention that, but let's get back to Mauna Loa. As we all know, on Sunday, November 27th, around 11:30 p.m., Mauna Loa began erupting in the summit Caldera. Probably a good half hour before it actually began erupting. I think a bunch of us kind of knew something was happening. I have like that quake feed app on my phone. So I started getting dings, for earthquakes, and it was like one right after another. And after like the 6th or 7th one, I was like, okay, something's up. So shortly after that, though, people started getting called into the EOC. And the EOC, by like, I would say midnight probably, was fully operational. All the county, state, and HVO liaisons were there and just kind of gathered and waiting. So I'm not really going to go into detail about like what happened next. I think everyone kind of has an idea of what happened during the eruption. But I just do want to say that it was pretty much one of the best case scenarios in terms of life and safety and impacts to critical infrastructure. Obviously, if it would have just stayed in the summit caldera, that probably would have been 100% the best case scenario. But given that it did what it did, this was also very good. It didn't end up crossing DKI highway, which is great. And it was relatively short-lived. It was, you know, a little over 2 weeks. So that was like really good for everyone, I think, working that event. But leading up to the eruption, Civil Defense and actually the county as a whole had started planning and preparing for a possible eruption like several months ago. So it had definitely been on the radar. Civil Defense is holding weekly meetings, internal planning meetings to help prep for that. And HVO also, they were super great in the sense that they met with the county and probably the state too, actually, with Haina maybe at least once a week to give updates. So, you know, things were definitely happening internally in terms of planning. And as part of that planning process, like the GIS aspect of it, we developed a web map and dashboard, and this was only internal. And it was just a good tool to help kind of better visualize like the volcano hazard zones, the Mauna Loa inundation zones, and potential impacts to communities and critical infrastructure. Part of that so that was an internal thing. So then it was like, what do we need to do for the public? So Civil Defense and HVO start to hold community meetings, and they focused on like the high risk communities. So that would be Ocean View, South Kona communities, and Pahala. And those communities were considered high risk, not because they had a greater probability for eruption impacts, because I mean, no one knew where that would happen, but they were high risk because those communities are located on the Southwest Rift Zone, and they have a higher risk for life and safety. So historically, some of the flows that have gone down the Southwest Rift have gone from summit to sea in a matter of hours. So that was kind of the area for public outreach. There had been plans to do some public outreach to Hilo and other communities. We just didn't get there. And actually it was funny, I think a tabletop exercise for an eruption was scheduled for December 8th. So also it was not necessary, and we actually didn't get to that point. But let me, I guess, to kind of go along with that, I wanted to kind of show some of the things that were done from the GIS side to help with the public outreach of it. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Okay, can everyone see that? All good there?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so this is the Civil Defense main website. It is an ArcGIS hub site. This was built prior to the eruption event, but a specific volcano hazard page was created during this planning process. So yeah, I didn't actually stand it up once the event started. It was created prior to it. But we had started doing, there wasn't really any hazard messaging at that point, nor was this volcano hazard map here. But we had started first, this page was just populated with, hold on, it's a little bit slow to load right there. With these two web maps, one showing volcano hazard zones and one showing, Civil Defense kind of coined it as Find Your Is. So the Mauna Loa inundation zones. So we wanted people to be able to put in their address and find, okay, look, I'm in this volcano hazard zone. I'm in this Mauna Loa inundation zone, as a way to help them kind of just prepare. If an eruption started and it came down, whichever rift zone it was going to come down, what inundation zones would be impacted. So this was also kind of highlighted at some of the community meetings. And also on this page, we added a bunch of information that basically linked back to Hawaii Volcanoes Observatory, to their webpage, because I mean, ultimately they're the authoritative source for data here, you know, so we wanted to really reference people back to their website. So that's kind of how this page initially started. And then once the eruption actually happened, these other elements were added. So hazard messaging and this volcano hazard map, which I'll get to in a second. So prior to, let me just open another tab here. Prior to having this volcano hazard map, we've always had the county, or civil defense has always had a hazard, or for quite a while, a hazard impact map, which you can see here. And right now it's kind of showing things for that severe weather. So initially when we started the eruption, I had everything on this map, or this dashboard, which is embedded in the ArcGIS hub site. But it became clear like pretty early on that this dashboard, and I made the mistake of, well, it's good and bad reading social media posts. So this dashboard, it's great if you're looking at it on a big screen on your computer, but it doesn't actually translate quite as well to like a mobile device or a smaller screen. So, and there, you know, there's a lot of things, other things going on that give you, you know, good information, but maybe wasn't so relevant for what was happening with Mauna Loa. So that led me to, this map still maintained eruption data on it, but I created another map, which then got embedded on our volcano hazard website. And it's embedded here. I always like to open it up in another tab. So there's also that option because I want to see like the full map and not have it embedded in a website. So this volcano hazard map was created as a public facing web map. But really, you know, the hazard map, the original hazard map is great and functions super well too. I was just trying to give the public more options. So, okay, let me just go back to the hub site. So this volcano hazard map is a web map app, right? But it's being displayed within the ArcGIS hub frame hub site, or you can, like I said, pop it out to its own page. So this is kind of what I want to focus on, was this hub site, which has kind of become Civil Defense's main website interface. The county does have another website platform that they use, but I really feel like the hub site is kind of great because you can stand up a hub site pretty quickly. You can add new pages, you can make changes. Like I said, I actually started this particular page, volcano hazard page, prior to the event starting, but had I not done that, it wouldn't have taken me very long once the event actually started to throw something up there. And obviously, like, changes are really easy to make, so you can kind of just get something up there and continue to improve it along the way. A little more, I like this hub site too also because you can easily embed other maps as an actual embedded map, or you can add button links. So you can do images. I mean, there's a lot of options for it. And I'm not a programmer or a web designer, so it's an easy kind of out of the box solution. And I think allows you to kind of make pretty nice looking websites, and it integrates with your other GIS products very nicely. So one thing I did want to kind of say about the hub site, you have a lot of choices. Like, you could set up an individual hub site for any different category or situations like you might have. Like, okay, maybe I'll do a hub site for hurricanes, a separate hub site for volcanoes, or, you know, whatever you're kind of working with. Or you could set up one hub site and have pages. And right now, Civil Defense has a combo approach, and I'm not sure if this is the best way to do things, but it is super flexible and easy to make changes. So right now, our volcano hazard site is actually a page within the Civil Defense hub site. And I guess on the back end, what that means is you have the ability to kind of set your template and your colors and make changes, and it carries it across multiple pages. So if you're looking for consistency in that sense, it might be a better idea to set up one hub site and add pages, but you certainly could have multiple hub sites. And I don't really know if there's, what the best practice is, or if one way is necessarily better than another way. But either way, like I said, it's very easy to edit and very easy to add content or to remove content. So I really like that aspect of it. So I guess it also kind of depends on your situation. I think I mentioned earlier, like the county has a separate website platform, but Civil Defense we've moved many of their pages into our GIS Hub. Not everything is there. I think the plan will be eventually to migrate everything to our GIS Hub. It just hasn't happened yet. And this mostly would be for consistency across pages, right? The way it looks different from our county site. So to have people kind of jumping back and forth gets a little bit confusing. But also it's a personal preference. Since I'm a GIS person, I would prefer to work in a GIS-based framework. And even if you don't know GIS, I feel like having access to edit a hub site is still very easy. Like I said, it's a good out-of-the-box solution, right? You don't need to be a programmer. There's a lot of good online help if you kind of like get stuck with something. So I don't know. I prefer it to the county website that we have. That program is a little clunkier to edit. And I feel like there's less options in terms of like embedding maps or just kind of the overall look of things. So the preference is the hub, maybe.
Asia, I'm going to jump in. So take a breath.
Yes. Okay.
I have a couple questions about
sure.
the hub site and just this, the way you're communicating out to the public. Do you have a sense of how many people access that, like the experience builder or this hub, the hub site itself?
So I'm pretty sure, and this actually might be a question more for Esri, but I'm pretty sure you can track that and there's a way to look at it. I haven't checked recently.
Well, sort of related to that, prior to the hub or, making these GIS products available on a website, how would you have communicated with the public? And has this helped in that outreach, do you think?
I mean, I think so. I guess if we didn't have the hub interface, right, we would be using the county's web platform, which is Granicus is the platform for that. It's not really easy to embed web maps. So if you like the look of, this is a personal preference, right? Some people, if you have a big screen, they just want to have it embedded. So if you like to embed something like this within your website, I felt that the Granicus option doesn't do that well. So it would have just been maybe even a button or like a text link within, the county's main website, which I think was done before during the Kīlauea eruption. We didn't have our GIS Hub at that point, right? That was 2018. So there certainly was a page stood up for that eruption, but I guess we weren't, that's a good thing, back to that. We were not communicating as well on the website was not updated frequently. We certainly were not doing web maps out to the public during that eruption, nor were we doing like a lot of social media posts. So this has definitely helped to facilitate better communication with the public. And just as an example, so this top hazard messaging area here, this little infographic is actually the last post that got done. So Civil Defense here, they message in multiple ways. So they do radio messages. They use the Everbridge system, and that pushes out radio, text, and email messages to people. So what I was trying to do was create, based off of that message, create an infographic that also went out to the social media platforms Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And then I would also post that onto the website as well. So just giving people a variety of options on how they want to receive their messaging, right? Because some people, they are more app-based, they're more text message-based, but I don't know, at least in our county, we have a lot of people who might not have smartphones or who just want that phone call. So we kind of feel that like messaging has to, cross multiple platforms, right? So this is just another way to do it. But I do think people, like, once you get used to checking a site, for updates, then it's easy to keep going back to it. So I actually I should have done that. That would be, I should go back and look and see what the hits were like for these sites, for the volcano hazard site and the Civil Defense main page. So I think I can check that and just kind of see what that looks like during the eruption time period.
And you mentioned an internal site as well. It did like the mayor have access to that, or did his people have access to that so they kept themselves updated, or were they in touch with Civil Defense for updates?
So the mayor loves web maps, which I'm very happy about. He loves mapping. So he did not actually have, so with the internal things, that's where it gets a little bit trickier, right? Because you need to meet people a named user, right? Within the ArcGIS Online system, they have to be a named user. They have to remember their password, which is fine. But for someone who might not use it all the time, that tends to be problematic. So the mayor does have access to things like this, but he was coming into the EOC, very early every morning during the eruption. And, if he didn't stay for most of the day, he would always come back in the evening. So he was in and out a lot. And we always had up on one of the monitors in the EOC, the internal map. So he was, checking things that way to kind of stay up to date on the status of things. And actually, for example, like this morning, he was in the EOC as well, because we were dealing with damages, like prepping for damage assessments. And we'd set up a online survey for people to report damage assessments. So I built like a quick web map dashboard so you could just really quickly see, what responses were coming in and where they were located. So he was in at 6:30 this morning looking at that map. So even though, right, I guess he could have access to it where he wouldn't come into the EOC, I think for him, he likes to show up and like kind of see it there. But yeah, so anything with the internal map, you would have to just make sure that people had a named user account or a generic account, but I don't think that's best practice anymore. So a named user account, and we're in the appropriate group.
Okay, thanks. And I see a couple of HAIMA folks on the call. One of the nice things about the platform is that the state is on the same platform as you folks. So I imagine there was some data sharing, or you made the data available? Yes,
so I was going to talk about that a little bit later, but let's just jump to it because I kind of like this back and forth dialogue. This is more interesting than me just like, running through things. So also prior to the eruption, HAIMA and Civil Defense had a ArcGIS online group set up. And so data was getting shared, data on web maps was getting shared that way. And that worked out really nicely. And so when the eruption started, so funny thing, like prior to the eruption, I had a discussion with HVO with Ken Hahn, like, hey, do you think we should talk about like data sharing and how that's going to look if an eruption were to happen? And, and everyone's like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. We just never got to that point, right? So after the first like day, it was quickly decided like maybe we should just, HVO also uses ArcGIS Online for internal use. So they were able to add HAIMA and myself to their group, and we were able to just have direct access to their data. So it worked really well that way, I feel. Go ahead.
No, just a quick follow-up to that. So as a result of that, is there now some sort of established agreement, to facilitate for future events?
Right. So there probably should be, but that's actually a really good thing. I'm going to write that down because we're having an after action review tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. But there probably should be, because I don't know. I mean, this is the third eruption that I've provided GIS support for. And really, this is the first time that I haven't spent all of my time making paper maps and printing maps and sending people shape files and, doing things that way. And it's way more efficient to just kind of use ArcGIS Online as that interface and to have people just either view a web map or pull a service if they want to pull it into their own map, right? So I do think this is kind of, this is a sign of progress, and it has been a huge step forward than where we were in the past. So at this point, after this eruption, I don't foresee us going back to how it was, before, with the emailing of shape files or printing all these paper maps. I think, at least from a civil defense standpoint, we want to move to more digital products. And this was just, I didn't make a paper map at all for this. Well, I did for some of the planning stuff, but anyways, not during the events. So I think that this will continue, right? We will provide web maps, we will provide services for people to pull into their own map products. But with the hub site too, I just think kind of things we're making progress here and moving forward with technology, which is great. But it probably would be good to have some kind of data sharing agreement in place. I think it was really hard the first day or two of the eruption because civil defense relies on HVO as the authoritative source for data. So we're not making our own flow polygons or trying to map out where we think the flow is, right? We're relying on them to give us that information since they're the experts. So unfortunately, they have a GIS person, but he's also a field geologist, and he does their UAS operations as well. So he was really busy out in the field the first day or two, trying to, do a combination of field work, gathering data, getting that data processed and trying to send it back. So there was a little lag the first maybe couple days of data, but that's kind of how it actually usually goes during the eruption. Like, people want to see on a map that nice flow polygon, right? That doesn't happen right away on day 1 or 2, even. It's usually day 3 or 4 that more satellite imagery comes in, that polygon can get digitized, they have more field observations. But either way, I think the way that the data was shared, I guess my point is that he was super busy with all these tasks, right? That if he had to then, work with shape files, export them, email them to people, it just would have, tied him up even more. So he already was having that online map in ArcGIS Online and that service running for internal for HVO. So it was just so much easier for him to just add us to that group, right? So that's kind of how that went. So yeah, I would suspect that will continue in the future, but I do like the idea of having some kind of formal agreement in place just to kind of facilitate that for future eruptions or events.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so I think, let's see. Arthur got me all sidetracked here with what I was gonna
I warned you.
But I guess one other thing I'll mention, since I was talking about HVO, is that so some of you, if you were following along, you may have seen that HVO had a daily map, a PDF map on their website that got posted once a day. They didn't have a web map. They weren't sending out services. And that's because HVO is federal and they have a lot of constraints on how they can share data. So, and they have to get a lot of approvals to do this or that. So it kind of got decided also early on that as a way around that, they would still do their once a day map, PDF map to their website, but they would vet the data. I had access to the data as it was coming in, as did Haima, as it was coming in from the field, but I would wait for them to kind of vet it and say like, hey, yeah, this is good. Like, with the flow polygon or even with the flow front points. And as soon as they said that was okay, I would push that into our public web map and have that as a public service that people could pull from. So that was kind of one way to facilitate that data sharing, because they can't do that from their ArcGIS Online account or from their website. So that was kind of a good way for the county to help push out data. But if you were wondering why maybe they didn't have their own web map, or they weren't the ones sending out like a link to service, a map service, that's the reason for that. But they were more than happy to let the county push out that public facing service. I think that probably wraps up what I was going to talk about data sharing, and also kind of what I was going to cover with the hub site. So I did want to leave time for just having more of a general discussion about any of this, or if there's specific questions I can answer, I'm happy to do so.
I've got another one.
Okay, good.
To the people watching, please, again, raise your hand, or you can enter a question in the chat. So Jonathan, I'm going to jump in here before you. You mentioned the Kīlauea eruption in 2018. Were there lessons learned there from a GIS perspective, or a collaboration perspective, or coordination perspective that helped with Mauna Loa?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think so. During that eruption, the scientists that in charge at HVO, it's different. It was Tina Neal, and now it's Ken Hahn, right? So although Ken was involved in that eruption from a UH standpoint, I think, but HVO's GIS person, he was still there during that eruption. And obviously I'm still here. So we kind of had, I feel like there was an expectation of okay, so they're going to go and collect data or pass this data, and this is what we're going to do with it. I think I forgot, because he had to remind me, his name's Mike Zoller, by the way. He was like, the first few days of that eruption didn't start smoothly either with data sharing, but that eruption was so long that you kind of tend to remember the better parts of it, right? More towards the end, where data was flowing really well. There were a lot of GIS people from USGS who flew in to help. They had several drone teams. USGS had a drone team. Hilo had their drone team. So we were getting all of this data. And it just seemed like, oh yeah, updates were happening right away. There was this great workflow. And when this eruption started, it was kind of, there was that expectation of, what needs to be done or what we can expect to get, from HVO. But there definitely were some bumps, I would say, the first day or two, just trying to get that flow kind of going. I think one of the lessons learned for me personally was that eruption, I spent the bulk of my time making large poster maps and reprinting them for people every day, sometimes twice a day, and then also emailing people shapefiles. And so I didn't have time to really do anything else, versus this eruption, since we said, hey, we're not doing paper maps, even for internal partners, you have internally, there's a web map up in the EOC you can look at. There's a public facing web map. If you want access to the data, you can pull the service. That just ended up, I had more time to help with other things in terms of just messaging or updates or whatever else needed to be done. So in terms of data sharing, I think the lesson learned from that was just trying to move forward with technology, right? Because this technology did exist in 2018. It's certainly maybe not as refined as it is right now. The hub sites didn't exist, but the web maps and that kind of stuff, that was available in 2018, but we just didn't really leverage that as well as we could have, So yeah, I think that was kind of the big takeaway from that eruption to this one, at least from my perspective.
Thank you. Jonathan. Sorry, Jonathan, you're muted. You had a question? You had your hand up?
Asia, thanks for the support and data from Hawaii County. It was really great working closely with you. So HVO did bring in an extra GIS person, I believe, from Cascadia at some point.
Yeah, so they did bring from Cascade Observatory, HVO did bring in Joe Bard. He also worked previously on the 2018 eruption, and he is a GIS person at that observatory. So he got on islands like, I can't remember, a few days after it started, or maybe towards the end of the first week. I think Ken had requested a GIS person right away to help Mike because he was tied up with things in the field. It just kind of took a little while. They also had another guy out of, I think the Mopart USGS who was helping remotely to do things. And then a lot of like the flow polygon that everyone likes to see on the map, that was coming from
Reston,
satellite
Virginia.
imagery. Yeah, from Reston, Virginia. It's their super secret imagery, right? But they would return like a polygon outline based off of like super high resolution imagery every day to both to HVO, and those guys would kind of work on it and clean it up a little bit and pass it back. Yeah. So they did get help for sure. Just the first few days, I think, Jonathan, you probably, because you had access to all the data too, you saw how the first few days it wasn't a lot, right? And then as it progressed, we kind of got into that routine, and it was like really great. But I think I'm not trying to say that's a fault of anyone's. Actually, I'm trying to point out that this happens at the start of every eruption. It's just, especially with the data, right? Because they're out in the field trying to do data collection, trying to make sure, no communities are impacted. It's kind of a lot happening, especially that first day or that first 24 hours, right? So I think it actually went really well, the data sharing and collaboration.
Oh yeah, it did.
Yeah.
This is Christine. There's a question in the chat. Is it worthwhile to provide an automated workflow for publishing data from HVO to the public?
Yes, probably. Yeah, certainly that could have happened. I think so. A lot of sometimes, especially with the polygons, right? Like it's not just like an addition of a new polygon as the flow progresses. Like sometimes they're going back and remapping areas. Hold on. You guys can still see my screen, right? Yes, okay. So for example, we actually didn't get this information down here. We had some of the summit caldera at the beginning, but then the rest of the caldera and this kind of overflow area, we didn't get that until, I don't know, towards the end of the first week, maybe. I can't quite remember. And then even areas down here, sometimes they're concerned with like just getting the flow current, right, to see how it's progressing. But there's some areas back here that tend to get filled in later. So, you can automate that, but you're not just like adding a new record, every time there's an update. Sometimes there's like substantial changes to the polygon where you're actually just probably deleting the whole thing and recopying it in. But yeah, you certainly could automate that. I guess, had their updates been like continuous throughout the day or throughout the night, I feel like that automation process would have probably been really good to have, right? But just given the nature of how, like with the return of the satellite imagery at a certain time every morning, plus their field work was usually in the morning early, there really was just like one data update a day, so I didn't automate the process, but it certainly could have been, yeah. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but obviously there would be value to it, I feel.
Thanks, Asia. I have another question in the chat. Have you tried using Google Earth Engine to detect land cover changes for before and after lava flow, or do you use another method?
So just to kind of, I guess, can that question be a little more specific, like with land, like you're wanting to know, what are you trying to look at there?
Lisa, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I just was in a meeting where people were using Google Earth Engine, and they They used the Kīlauea volcano. This was before the recent lava volcanic eruption, but they used the Kīlauea 2018 eruption as an example, and were able to just give certain dates for a before and after. And then this Google Earth Engine was able to pull in imagery, satellite, maybe infrared imagery, and compare the two, and then give an output of where there was change. And I think you could even export a shape file or whatever the Google version of it is from that. So I thought, I'm just wondering if you folks are using that technology. It was really fast too.
Oh yeah, that sounds super cool. No, we're not. I actually don't use a lot of Google Earth, right? Like the county's an Esri shop. So we primarily, are using that. And then we also have access to photometry and kind of historical photometry as well. But I do, I didn't know about that product. So that does sound very cool. But I wonder, so they were demoing this as like an after the fact thing, right? From the 2018 eruption, like using it as a case study.
Yeah.
Okay. So like during the eruption, that still might work and be good. I'm not quite sure, but like, once again, like we're not going to generate, the county is not going to generate flow polygons, right? On our own, even if we're like, hey, we think we saw it move a little bit. Like, for example, like we also had the county fire helicopter going up to take some points using, had set up, they were doing it with a GPS unit or in quick capture. But those points were nice references, but I wasn't putting those on like a public map, right? Because I was still relying on HVO to be the authoritative source for like what got put out to the public, right? But yeah, I'd actually like to see a demo of that Google Earth thing. That sounds really cool. So
yeah, you know what? It was actually like a military.
Okay.
It's like somebody at the Department of Defense. It's like a little geospatial group there, and they are using it also to look at change in Ukraine to see where there's building damage. But I guess it's all based on satellite imagery, and I think the satellites that they were using for this maybe only take a picture every 4 or 5 days or something. There's some limitations like that. It was interesting though. I can send you a link to a tutorial to get an idea.
Yeah.
It's real cool.
Okay, no, I would like just that. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So yeah, that would be great if you could share a link with that.
Jonathan, you got your hand up again?
Yeah, I was wondering, would the Google Earth Engine be able to detect barren lava rock change with another barren lava rock change?
I mean, I think it's just looking at changes in elevation. So I think it's,
okay.
That's how it does it, I think.
Thanks.
Asia, this is Christine Chaplin with the statewide GIS program. I just wanted to thank you for being so responsive and providing all this information to the public. It was really, really helpful. I even practiced on it, to create a web app for HIGICC. And yeah, I just can't thank you enough. This is really great work you've done. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Christine. That's really nice. I mean, so you were able to pull the services successfully, right?
Yeah. And then we just, we put it up on our website as well. It's just like, it's the same data, but everything was publicly available. We also pulled like thermal hotspots that were provided by NOAA and NASA. It was really quite interesting, I thought, to put it together and kind of fun to play with the new ArcGIS Online symbology that they have.
Yeah, cool.
Really fun to like add the glow of the lava and just make it look like so. And I finally got to use the firefly symbology, so very exciting.
Yeah, no, that's great. You should have sent me a link to your web map.
Oh, I will. I can do that.
Okay.
I'll send it up in the chat.
I'm curious, how other people are using it. And then I know for some people, you're really used to using web services and pulling into web maps. But I think for others, for maybe more of the like old school GIS people, which I love and appreciate, by the way. It's a new thing, right? Like, what? I need to add a service to my map, or I have to make a web map. Like, how does that work? So I think for some people, this is kind of a newer thing. And, I just think it's a good transition, or for people to start to get used to maybe data sharing looking like this, more so than like shape files, and especially for volcanic eruptions, at least for Hawaii County. I don't see us going back to, to emailing people shape files. So like if you were involved in the 2018 eruption, you would have gotten like mostly probably from me, because I emailed a bunch of people to help āweoweo with that as well, like daily or twice a day shape files. And I don't see that really happening again anymore. So sorry. It's great to hear, Christine, that like, you were able to pull in the service. That seemed to work well. You can kind of do what you want with it, right? So I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, it was a lot easier. And I am one of the old timers, it seems like these days. Like this is all new. Like when I started, of course, it was ArcInfo and ArcMap. And, back in the days, we were sending the shape files. So this is fantastic. And what's really nice about it too is, since, you're doing the updates for your data, NASA and NOAA are doing their updates, I, as a user, all I have to make sure is everything is accurate and is showing properly, right. And just vetting the data, right? Of course, before adding it, so yeah, bravo again. Yeah. And we can track a little bit of the usage in ArcGIS Online. I didn't have a ton of views. I haven't checked it in a while, but we've had over like 200 views of it. So it's kind of fun to play with, and it gives me the practice I need as, someone who should know this is technology better in my position too. So I appreciate that. We did have another question in the chat. It was just wondering how much geoprocessing tools did you work with to give technical data in the attribute tables associated with these layers?
0 geoprocessing tools. copy and paste. Like once I had the layer up, like created the feature layer. Yeah. Very low tech on that side. Once again, I think maybe if you had an automation process in place to do the updates, then obviously you would be using some type of either script or geoprocessing tool to do that. Yeah, it was just pretty simple. I feel like in ArcGIS Online, I created that feature service and basically with our feature layer, and would just either update it, or there were times I had to kind of delete all the records out of it and add in, like I said, with the polygons, right? It got kind of squirrely there during some of their updates. So it's better just to, so as not to like miss something, it was better just to kind of wipe everything and add, so copy and paste back into it. If you were to see the original data set from āweoweo, it would look a little different in the sense of like, they tried to track it by eruption day. So like day 1 to day 12 plus, right? So on say day 5, you might have 3 records for the polygon outline. And on day 6, you have 30, just because of the way they were backfilling in data, not because it necessarily moved on the flow front, which it did a little bit, obviously, but they would also backfill based off of that, high resolution satellite imagery. They would backfill some of the polygons, or just kind of redo them or improve them, or there would be multiple polygons sometimes for one eruption day. So to kind of streamline that for the public side, I would merge all of those. So I guess maybe technically merge is a geoprocessing tool, but it's not a fancy one, right? So I would just merge those records so that the public would see one record for day 1, one for day 2. Just to kind of, I don't know, just make it a little less confusing, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Christine, I just pulled up your map, and it's really cool. I like your map.
Oh,
so in the future, if you create something that's a great product, right? And looks much different than the product that I created for civil defense. but I would be happy to share your map because it's using authoritative data, right? So
Yeah.
in the future, like if you could email it to me or let me even, because I didn't even know you made that actually until just right now. That would be awesome, because then I can push it out on, I could put a link on our website, or I could push it out on social media, on the, on the social media pages to check out this other map. And, I don't know, I think it's nice to, as long as my feelings are, as long as the data source is using authoritative, or it's, using the authoritative data sets, then I'm happy to share other people's maps, right? Because as like map makers, we're all going to come up with something that looks a little bit different, but I think there's value in all of it, right? So yeah, in the future, please share, if you make anything cool like this, please share it with me and I can kind of push it out so you get more views as well.
Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah, this is a lot of fun to create, that's for sure. So you can see like the glow, like so much fun. But
yeah, no, that's really nice.
And it also gives people, like your map is beautifully done as well. And I think it gives people an idea of, a different way to visualize things, right? So I use the imagery instead, and then I threw in like federal lands, because I think that there was some questions I picked up on social media about how close is it to PTA, and are they going to wipe it out, right? Because there's a couple groups that were pretty excited about that. So just different things, since I had the time, right? For HIGICC to go through this stuff on off hours, and just see what the community buzz was when maybe you were busy, right? In the EOC. So it's just a different perspective. And yeah, we should all really be sharing with each other more. And I should have sent you a link to it directly when I was asking about the services. So I'll do that in the future. Thank you.
No, yeah, thank you. Like, I think that looks really great. And like you said, the federal land, like PTA, right? I guess maybe I did not add that to our public web map. Anyways, I had it on our internal web map for sure. But if I didn't add it to our public web map, that probably was an error on my part, because I think a lot of people, so once that lava viewing area opens, right, off of Old Saddle Road, I mean, there were people, even though there were signs and it was like definitely prohibited to walk, to try to get out of your car and walk out there, people did try, but like, I guess what people needed to understand that the flow front was on PTA property. And there's all kinds of issues there with unexploded ordinances and who knows what else, right? But maybe a lot of people didn't know that, right? So
yeah, there's a lot of data that would have made it a little bit better. Like I think that you had on your map that I didn't add on mine because I couldn't find it, was the road closure or the parking areas where, and that just makes it better for everyone. But yeah, really fun. So thank you so much again.
You're welcome.
Hey, Asia, this is Arthur. You reminded me when you mentioned the 2018 and the shape files and all that. There was a Kīlauea eruption before 2018. I don't remember what year it was, but
2014.
I was at 2014, must have been. I was at the Tourism Commission, and I think I emailed you to ask you for those, because at the time that lava flow was threatening to cross whatever road that was in Puna.
Yeah.
It didn't, but we had schools right there, so they were interested in getting updates, and I did all those updates in our map at the time.
Yes, and I sent you probably shape files every day for that.
Yeah,
maybe twice a day. Yep. So that was, but I think back in maybe the web stuff had come online in 2014. I don't remember.
I don't think I had ArcGIS online because
we didn't either. The county didn't either. Okay, yeah. So that was like not even a possibility, whether it was not a possibility technology wise, or just like the county didn't have that capability at that point, right? Contract wise, yeah. So yeah,
so you or Christine just mentioned the road closure. I guess Christine mentioned the road closure. Besides collaboration with HVO, were you getting data from your transportation folks and
yeah, so I don't know if So those were not county roads, right? They were state roads. But we are state highways people on islands here. They were always in the EOC. So they're great partners and they're always willing to share information, which is really good. Are you talking about the road closure or like the lava, it's not a part, okay, lava viewing area? Or which road closure were you talking about in particular?
Whatever Christine wasn't putting on
Christine,
her.
which one were you talking about?
Yeah, I was talking about like where it would be, where the road closure was. I tried to add, so DOT does have quite a significant road closure service, but it didn't include that for some reason. So I'm not sure if that was just county that's maintaining that off the top of my head right now, or if it was state or who it was.
So, I mean, but really like the only road closure per se was the Mauna Loa access road that goes to the observatory.
Okay.
Because it never crossed GKI anywhere, so nothing there got closed. And then they opened that lava viewing area, which was the old saddle road, which goes through part of PTA. But that, when it's like open, I mean, the road kind of already existed for a while. So I don't know that that would be considered. I mean, that's done now. They closed that off again. But yeah, technically, I feel like the only road closure would have been that Mauna Loa access road that goes to the observatory. And they closed that like on day one. Once we saw that the flow was headed down in that direction, it got closed much, I don't know, yeah, ahead of it crossing that road actually, just so people wouldn't drive up there and try to drive like closer to the flow, right? So that road is a little tricky too. That Mauna Loa access road is not a county road, but there's been some debate recently about if it should be a state road. It's on a big state parcel, but anyways, yeah. Is it a state road? Is it not? I don't know. It's currently the road exists within a state parcel, but it's not a county maintained road.
Okay, we're coming up on time. I don't see any hands up. Anything in the chat? I don't see anything in the chat. So with that, if nobody else has any other questions, I'm going to thank you, Asia. This was very informative. I appreciate your talking about the hub. That was my request. But a very good case study, I think.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much, Arthur. And I am happy to talk about the hub. I think I would encourage people to use it or to, I mean, I guess one of the things I want to mention really quick also was that I'm an admin for our ArcGIS enterprise account. So that goes for ArcGIS Online. So it's really easy for me to do pretty much everything, right? So I'm not sure, I guess it just depends, you know, within the state, how your licensing and permissions work out. But I do think that, you know, the hub is a nice way to go. And if you want to stand up like a website for your organization and you don't have access to whatever website provider like the state uses, or you don't have access to edit content, this might be a good alternative. I guess you have to ask Arthur for permission, right?
Yeah, so that's okay. A whole different.
Yeah.
And that talks speaks to the governance.
Right.
Because I think for most agencies, creating web pages for your agency site are, I wouldn't say controlled, but vetted at least. Somebody looks at it before it gets up to the public. That's something we haven't really locked down on our AGOL site, but I'd say 99% of our users can actually create their own hub site.
Oh, okay.
That's had content great. They wanted, you know, if they had a purpose for it or use for it, they have those permissions. So, but yeah, very sensitive or timely topic about who should be able to do that and what vetting needs to take place for that to happen. Yeah, whole different lunch and learn.
Oh, yes, but at least, you know, the option or the it's there, right? The technology, the opportunity is there for people to kind of think about that. So I think that's a great thing, right? And the hub sites make it really easy to kind of, for pretty much, I feel like, you know, anyone to kind of set one up and add content to it. So
yeah, there's a lot of different initiatives and reasons to have a site like that. So yeah, it's great to see it put to such good use.
Okay, great. And if anyone has any other questions or needs more info about anything, please feel free to email me. My email is pretty easy, asia.wasser@hawaiicounty.gov.
Okay, well, thanks again, Asia. And thanks everybody for joining us today. And I'll let you folks know when the recording is available.
Great, thanks so much. Merry Christmas.
Hey, Merry Christmas.